Cool. We're live. Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Awesome.
everyone, for joining. I think I'm just going to look at the attendee list, and it looks like we already have a pretty sizable group here. So I think we should just get started. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, let's go for it. Why not?
Okay. So in that case, let me just look at my sort of script. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, Mental Health in the Times of COVID-19. This webinar is part of the OpenTable In It Together webinar series that is bringing together industry leaders. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them through the Q&A engagement tool. We will do our best to answer these questions at the end of the webinar, and we will keep them anonymous. During our conversation, Doug is going to mention a couple of resources that will be linked out in the resource list that you should see at the bottom of your screen. The webinar will be recorded and shared out afterwards. So let's get started. Even before COVID-19, mental health in the hospitality industry was becoming an increasingly important topic. Now, with the changes that COVID-19 has brought to the industry, the topic of mental health has become even more pressing. One of the people leading the charge to change the way that mental health in the hospitality industry is perceived is Doug Sanham. Hi, Doug.
Hi.
Doug established Pilotlight together with Chef Andrew Clark in 2017. And the organization's mission is to highlight the challenges that hospitality staff face around mental health. So thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
So let's get started. And I'm just going through my questions. Maybe we can start with you telling us a little bit more about Pilotlight and how that got started.
Yeah, so Pilotlight started about 3.5 years ago now. It was just I was looking to find some resource to be able to do something like this because as I was in my very first head chef role, I was finding it increasingly difficult to be able to almost kind of father everybody. We're quite the family in hospitality, and it was getting difficult on my load to be able to take on board what everybody was, how they were feeling and what they were going through, but noticing the changes from a personal point of view as opposed to just a workplace point of view. And I was pointed in the direction of Andrew, who put a post out on World Mental Health Day a few years ago. To say, he was looking to try and do something similar as well, and we met up and I think we had an afternoon conversation and we decided we'd just go ahead and start doing something. It was, originally we'd thought as we were chefs we would just do it about chefs, but then we come to realize that hospitality is so vast and so huge that the most sensible thing to do is to just try and attack the whole industry and raise awareness more than anything on the topic, which is more devastating than the virus that we're going through at the moment.
Yeah. And why did you start that campaign to begin with?
Well, for me, it was very personal. When I first started in my first position in a hotel, I was going through some things that I suffer from something called disassociation, and I had a very serious episode in which I lost about 24 hours of my day, and I woke up in hospital because I had taken a massive overdose and I tried to take my own life, but I was unaware of it. Unaware of what was going on. Honestly, I just thought I was asleep. So waking up to friends and family and saying what I'd done was more depressing that I didn't know, and filled me with anxiety that I didn't know what happened than it was anything else. And it wasn't down to hospitality that it happened, but at that time, and this was 12 years ago, at that time it was hushed up quite quickly. I wasn't allowed to tell anybody at work. We weren't allowed to make a big deal out of it. We just said that I'd had to have an operation or something. I can't remember the exact thing I was told to say, but being honest about it wasn't allowed. And growing up with ADHD, when I was younger, it was something that wasn't perceived as a recognized illness. I was just classed as a very naughty kid. So I understand most of my life has been about having something that people don't understand or necessarily don't want to understand as a real thing. So I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to showcase that it is a real problem. That suicide, depression, anxiety is a huge thing, and it's huge in hospitality. With 1 in 4 people in the world suffer from a mental health illness, but hospitality is 1 in 2 people.
That's a lot. And why Pilotlight? Why is it called Pilotlight?
Well, I mean, it was a very chef thing for us. When in the stoves in the kitchen, you've got little pilot lights which ignite all of the gas. If the pilot lights go out and they can't work, then you can't physically do your job. And it's the same principle in your head. If you're struggling with something mentally, you're not physically able to do your job properly at your full potential. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about COVID-19 a little bit, and of course, that's having an enormous effect on the hospitality industry, and obviously on the mental health of people in the hospitality industry. What impacts are you seeing?
Well, to begin with, obviously, with all of the restaurants closing and everybody going through exactly the same thing, it created a huge community spirit. Where I live in Kent, I set up about a year ago now a WhatsApp group with all of the restaurants in Kent. It's slowly over the last 3 weeks got a lot bigger, and people are still helping each other. People are offering advice on what they're doing. All of the government systems that are going through, if somebody doesn't know how to do it, they're helping each other. So there's been a real community spirit around it, but also a very large amount of fear. Where I think just where people are very unclear on how long this is going to go on for, and whether they'll be able to recover.
And what are some of those major concerns? Thinking in terms of mental health, what are some of those major concerns that are kind of coming to light as this drags on, really?
Well, some of the things that I've noticed is. Well, it's 2 really. People that spend very little time with their family, who have a very kind of good working relationship. It's this is going to be quite straining on them. They're not used to being together every day, all the time. It could be good, but it's a life choice that they don't normally have. And then you've got people who rely on their job as their family. So. There's people that will probably be at home at the moment completely on their own. They've been isolated for a long period of time, possibly nervous about whether they're going to get their job back. Not so nervous about money at the moment because hopefully they're being covered. And it's those people that are the most concerning because they're likely to, the industry unfortunately is quite renowned for certain type of people and sort of a bit of alcohol abuse and a bit of drug abuse. And my worry is that people that are on their own at the moment might be doing that more or picking it up as a habit just to get through. And it's dangerous. It's a dangerous time for especially someone that's never used to being on their own. Most people in hospitality, they're on their own because they've gone to bed and then they're straight back to work. So it's they don't get that time for it. But at the moment, the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to be. And they're the ones that I'd be most concerned about at the moment.
And then when we talked initially, you also had some strategies like kind of making a to-do list and like what are the things that people ought to be doing? It's interesting because you mentioned 2 things. One is like being together with family, which can feel like a lot. But then the other end of that is being like just on your own completely. But maybe the strategy is, I don't know, maybe the strategy is the same for both. So what should people be doing to kind of get through this time?
Well, I mean, you kind of said it yourself there quickly, like time is a huge thing that, we've not been blessed with before. You know, I know it's not an ideal scenario to be having all of this time, but you know, there's a lot that we can do. One of the things that's huge in hospitality is routine prep lists, you know, your daily job lists and things like that. I would seriously recommend trying to maintain a small level of job list, even if it's just 2 or 3 things that you make sure that you do every day. One of the things that I've got that I've set up for myself is just like a weekly kind of rota. So on it, it's got times of the day where I will do specific things, and those things are solely for me. It's not for any other work purpose or anything like that. You know, for example, at 5 o'clock today, I'm going to be spending an hour and a half learning the guitar, because that's the thing that I've wanted to do at the moment. So it's completely different. It's not hospitality related. And it happens to be a thing that I know makes me comfortable outside of work, music. So it's focusing on something that maybe is not necessarily normal for you, but actually it's specifically for you, and nothing to do with work. And if you can help develop these little habits now, when we're back into work, hopefully there's something that you know you can resort to as a release, something that you can continue to learn. And it could also just be simple things like some of the recipes you've been writing down for the last 6 months and you've not had a chance to try. You can try it now, books that you've never read. But I would try to limit the amount of news. Social media is not too bad at the moment because we're all in the same boat, but the amount of news that you read, because it's all different every day. And I think the only relevance we've got is the one evening conversation where the government are actually telling us what's going on. But I wouldn't pay attention to the news because it's fear mongering and it can make people worry.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you know, so some of the strategies you've mentioned, kind of going, you know, maintaining a routine, things like that. You know, restaurant owners and GMs are, you know, they have an additional challenge, is that on the one hand, you know, they're obviously hoping to kind of support their staff and keep their businesses afloat. But at the same time, they also have the challenge of kind of looking after themselves as well. So what advice do you have for them?
Well, in England, we've kind of been relatively lucky in the systems that have been put in place for the small businesses. You know, retail, leisure, and hospitality have actually been looked after better than most. And there are solid locations to be able to apply for these grants and things that fall into place, and how they can look after their staff as well through the furlough system. So there's a bit of income to support. One of the things that, you know, a suggestion from just some friends of mine that are doing it at the moment, they can maintain their restaurant name and keep the name out there by doing little takeaway things, hampers, recipe ideas. Some of the chefs that I know are simply just doing, recipe filming. So they're in their kitchen doing a little film, talking about food and getting that out there as well. So it's keeping your skill set alive and keeping them occupied, but also these things are there to try and keep the business alive as well. But one thing that I would say for owners and people is, if they could, if you've got 700 staff, maybe not, try and phone them every day, but if you have got a small restaurant, maybe organize like once a week a little quiz night or a FaceTime call just to catch up with everyone, a team meeting, if you want to call it team meeting, just so you can touch base and let everybody know, how you're doing, find out how your team are doing. Because, I think I've said it quite a few times, but the social distancing doesn't mean that we have to stop talking to each other. It's very important that we keep up communication in whatever way that is. And your team, you're going to want your team back when we're good to go. So it's probably best to keep in touch with them now.
Yeah. And, keeping in touch and continuing to sort of stay in touch, whether it's your staff or other colleagues or, your family, friends. I think, what are some of the warning signs when it comes to mental health? Like, what should people be watching out for? What behaviors are kind of signals that something's going astray? And how do you figure that out when you can't see the people face to face?
Yeah, it's quite difficult when for the people that are completely on their own, it would be a bit more difficult. But I'd say that one of the most simple ones would be just communication for them. If you find that you can't get hold of somebody, or they don't really respond to text messages, they're not getting involved in group chats, they might not be joining, your weekly quiz night or whatever it is that you're doing as a group or friends. It's about maybe, rather than sending a text, because text messages can be bombarding, and they can make people feel a bit anxious. I think maybe just a little call, and nudge that call a couple of times just to try and get a bit of a chat, and then maybe just send a text message to say, hope you're okay. Was wanting to catch up about something, or absolutely anything, just to reach out, because without being in front of them, it's going to be quite difficult, But in terms of people that are together, maybe they've got family and things. It's it's noticing things like lethargy, lack of appetite, no motivation, not wanting to do things. With the weather we've been quite blessed with in England at the moment, going for a walk once a day, even if they don't want to do that, there's small things, but they all add up, and it always starts off with a little I'm not sure I can be bothered today, to being tired, not holding yourself, and these are things that we notice daily in the kitchen as well. So it's difficult, but yeah, it's easy to notice, especially now as we're going to be either with people all of the time or not hearing from people as much.
Yeah. And what support? How can people support one another as they're self-isolating? I think you mentioned some things like reaching out, but what other tactics are there?
I think it's it's building on conversation. I'd try not to wait for people to communicate. Maybe get involved straight away with the communication if you can. There's some difficulty with support, but there's also a lot of online things as well. We've got a thing going up on the website tomorrow, which is just a little bit of a guidance pack that people can download as a PDF and read through, just to help themselves or help each other. There's some people that are doing daily sort of yoga things, meditation techniques, sound meditation online as well. So there's quite a lot that can be done that people can do for themselves if they want to, but also just as a bit of an encouragement as well. Try and push each other to do exercise, try and push each other to cook together, to learn together, or even give yourselves a bit of free time. It's important to be active, but not to feel the stress of being active all the time. Don't feel like it's something that you have to do and put that stress on yourself. But I think it's very healthy for you if you do, and you try and do it naturally.
Mm. You mentioned a pack going on your website. I assume that's the Pilotlight website. Do you maybe want to mention the URL?
Yes, it's www.pilotlightcampaign.com. There'll be a new thing up there. We're looking at doing some blogs and video blogs. Me and Andrew will do some things as well, and we have a lot go through our Instagram social media as well, the Pilotlight one. We're actually at the moment we have some live interviews with people in hospitality, and what they're up to, how they're looking after themselves, and little guidance things as well. And it's people from restaurant owners to your commie chef as well. So it's real versatile, just to see how everybody's getting on and what they're doing.
Cool. Now, one of the things we've addressed a couple of times, obviously, is the difference between kind of face-to-face interaction and sort of what we have today, which is all virtual interaction, or nearly all virtual interaction. So how important is like face-to-face interaction, and how does the current climate, I mean, sure, there are ways, we're connecting, but like, how does that work, or what can you do?
Well, I mean, it's very difficult, because I've always been the sort of person that kind of enjoys my own time. I've always found, even as a chef and being in the kitchen all the time, I've always found being around people all of the time a little bit uncomfortable, but it's actually something that I seriously miss at the moment, proper human interaction. And I think the thing that I miss doing is something that started quite early on, which we went from having handshakes to the elbow bump and things like that. And one of the things I've always done with my teams and my friends is just a quick hug. And I think it's just that sort of big smile on your face. How's everybody doing? A big hug on, and I think that's the difference between that and this virtual thing at the moment. But I think the as you can see, I can still smile. You can still see me smiling, and I think it's important that we try and use the video calling as much as we can, because although you might not be able to see somebody within the 2 meter gap, you can you can definitely get a sense of how somebody is, how they're talking, how they're feeling, and you can laugh, joke, and I don't know, have a glass of wine with each other or a cup of tea or something like that through this as well. So if you do know that somebody's struggling, maybe just say, look, let's have a cup of tea, do a FaceTime, put the kettle on, and sit there and have a cup of tea and a catch up, because doing this right now is the best of what we've got. And I think it's very important that we do see each other, not through social media all of the time, because that could be quite downing, but like very much face to face, see each other, smile, engage, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you mentioned social media. Often, at least, before COVID-19, social media was always like, this perfect world, and don't pay too much attention to it. You're just comparing yourself to lives that like don't exist in that way as they're portrayed anyway. So that's changing a little bit because it's just one of the few ways that people can connect. So how do you use social media, and what's changed there? And then you also mentioned not reading the news, which I should probably be doing less as well. But like social media, what are you doing there, and how can people stay in touch there, and how has that changed?
So, I mean, my personal social media at the moment is simply I've been loading pictures and sort of recipe ideas, breaking down into pictures on my story, but I've not actually been paying much attention to other people's stories, and I've not been paying much attention to the feed. I've just been uploading things that I think might be interesting and useful to people, and then leaving it at that. And then through the Pilotlight one, as I said, we've been trying to showcase everybody and how they're getting through it at the same time. So what people are up to, how they're looking after themselves, what things they might be learning, what hobbies they might be picking up, so that it's helpful for you to see that everybody, absolutely everybody, is going through exactly the same thing. And for once, social media, I mean, other than some people's houses are bigger than other people's houses and some kitchens bigger than other people's kitchens, for once, every single person in the world is going through exactly the same thing. So unless you think, oh, his kitchen's better than mine, which is a worry that you don't need. It's it's seriously a good time for Instagram and communication and seeing that, and really actually socially connecting, because I think that was what social media was supposed to be set up for, people like engaging with each other, So I would say for once it's a good thing, but don't overload it. Don't spend your morning and night on there looking at what other people are doing. Try and do something for you, try and showcase how you're getting through it as well.
Cool. And how can people find the Pilotlight social handles? What is the Pilotlight social handle? And should they be following you on Instagram, or where should they be following you?
I think the best one to follow us is Instagram. That's the one that we use most for engagement. And it feeds into Facebook, but it's just Pilotlight Campaign, @Pilotlight Campaign. It's worth a read. We try and share everything that other people are doing, and try and make it so that it's there's no pressure with it at the moment. We're not bombarding people with how they should and shouldn't live their lives, just how you could probably better yourself at the moment, and things that you could try at home if you're struggling. That's it.
Cool. And what other resources are there available if you want to look up things?
So, I mean, if you were struggling with a lot at the moment, our friends at Hospitality Action have got quite a few packs available online as well. So obviously we've got the pack that will be going on our website, but also Hospitality Action. You know, we've been helping to push people to raise money for them. They've got a fund available to help some of the more staff that are struggling, that are on their own. You've got the Mental Health Foundation website, which is mentalhealth.org. They are the kind of like governing charity of mental health in our country. There's a lot of things on their website to help. And I would say the charity Mind as well. But there's one that I would plug very importantly if people are struggling and are in a a dangerous situation and they feel that they can't talk to anybody. There's a website called Shout. They're a little campaign which is very similar to the Samaritans, but they will help with absolutely anything at any time, anywhere. So if you're struggling, they will answer the phone and they will call you. So I think that's one of the things that's very important. There will be somebody there that can speak to you. So if you are struggling, just look at those things. But we've also got resources on our website as well. So if you need something, it will point you in the best direction.
Cool. And so all of the resources, let me just mention this. If you are attending this webinar, many of the resources that Doug has mentioned are in this kind of resource list. So you can view those there. So Doug, you've mentioned a couple of things that Pilotlight is doing on social media to help support. What are there any other initiatives that you have that are outside of social media?
A little bit, yeah. So I'm looking. I used to do free talks once a month at Trade in Soho. So I'm looking at setting up a maybe Zoom Pilotlight trade talk as well, once a week, or maybe we'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll do it once a week or a couple of times if need be, where we'll just get people together in the Zoom call. It doesn't matter from where or who you are, and just have a little catch up about how we're doing, and just talk about us and our lives. And if you're struggling, get involved and open up. And if not, there's no pressure to do so either. We've got a system that we'd like to go in place that we're going to try and make it online virtual if we can, that we were doing before. It's called Breaking Bread. And the idea is simply that, the best conversation anybody can have is with each other. It reduces anxiety by up to 80% if you have a proper conversation, and it's revolved around food and bread basically. So once upon a time people would catch up over a loaf of bread and some red wine. So it's an old-fashioned thing. It's something that we'd like to bring forward and just to get people talking and engaging a bit more.
Cool. Then to kind of round out my questions before we go into the Q&A, but at the beginning you mentioned this kind of community spirit and people coming together. How do you think, or do you think that will extend past the lockdowns? Like once we start opening up again, do you think that will last?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially from a hospitality point of view. I believe we're all in this together, and we're always going to be in this together. And I think everybody's found their voices and their friendship levels between. I think from a small business point of view, the public are very much now more aware of the local butchers, the local bakers, all of these shops that they've probably not been in for so long that they're having to look out for so that they can get some eggs or they can get some bread. I think they're now knowing that they exist again. Not that, no one's ever heard of a bakery before, but everybody kind of uses the supermarket for the same thing. So my hope is that everybody continues to use them and all of these businesses can thrive properly again when we're back to it. Because as much as we've got frontline workers, we've got people that have got the bakeries that are open. They still start at 3 o'clock in the morning to make sure that there's bread ready for 8 when they go in there. You've still got the butchers that are that are open to the public and having to distance themselves. That all of these proper places, people are they are sticking their neck out so that we've got food at home. So I think it's very important that from a public perspective, everybody remembers that. And from our perspective in hospitality, the fact that these people are still supplying us if we're doing takeaways or we're doing groceries and things, it's important to remember that they're there and really look after each other when this is open.
Yeah, makes sense. I will move into the Q&A portion. So one question that's come in is, what can you do to best prepare yourself for when things are back to normal, as is likely going to be a challenging time?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the things I was looking at researching yesterday. I think now the best time for us is to try and get ourselves a bit better mentally and physically. Exercise and a morning routine is probably going to be the best thing, because we're going to be going from 100 miles an hour. Well, we went from 100 miles an hour to nothing, and now we're going to go back to 100 miles an hour, because it will open, and it will open dramatically. It will, we might have a bit of a slow release in, but I think it's going to be very thick and fast. And I think if we can look after ourselves now, and get little routines of maybe 5-10 minute stretch meditation or exercise or something like that, and focus in on the exercises when you're doing them, so that your mind can be void of everything else. These strengths will be able to take through, because by the time we start again, we'll notice the mental effect and the physical effect that it's having, because it takes a very small amount of time for it to have a good effect. And just be gentle with yourselves when you go forward. Remember that we've stopped because we've had to, and it is good for us that we have, not in the best possible light, but it's still good for us that we have. So if we can just better ourselves and then remind ourselves that we're taking it easy as we're going forward, still push yourselves massively, but then just remind yourselves that we've got this, and it's going to take time, and that if we don't look after ourselves, it's likely to happen again.
Yeah. Now I just want to kind of prompt our audience, if you do have any questions, please do submit them through the Q&A tool that is on your screen. Doug is here, and I'm sure is happy to answer them. So I encourage you all to do that. And it will be, we will not be sharing any names. So if you have any questions that you prefer to be anonymous, we will not be saying who asked them. So I do have one more question here. I agree with your tip, Doug, to limit media time. Sometimes you just want to switch off and give your mind a break. When connecting with friends and colleagues, it's very easy to focus on all of the stuff around COVID. What are your tips to help guide the conversation away from this topic? So I will just say that's exactly the kind of conversations I'm having at home. Every time I think, oh, it's great, I'll give my parents a call. And it seems like we've all, at least, I don't know, in my immediate circle, everybody's mutated into like scientists. We all are like all in the know about, what we should be watching out for and the latest that's coming out. So like, that doesn't actually end up being a break. It kind of ends up being like more of the same. So how do we get away from that, so that those conversations can be breaks and can be like just something more positive?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough really, because even if you just turned around and said, what have you been up to? You're going to be resorted back to probably nothing because I'm inside because of COVID. But I think it's, maybe try starting a conversation about what you're doing for you. Like I said earlier, I'm making a point of learning the guitar. So for me, that's a conversation which can then lead into music choice, like live music, talk about all of the the sort of live gigs that are going on at the moment, and did you see this person sing the other night, and really try and veer it away. I know absolutely everything is revolving around this at the moment, but it's something that we can't control ourselves. But what we can control is what we're doing, what we're looking at, how we're looking after ourselves, what we're eating, what we're drinking, what we're learning. And as like I said earlier, as difficult as a time that this is, it is time, and it's time that we've not had before. So I think seriously utilizing it and looking at how to better ourselves and have that conversation around that. Talk about your exercise program. Talk about I don't know, we spoke about it earlier, but I've spent all weekend making sourdough pizza and sourdough crumpets and everything sourdough and everything Marmite. But it's, these are conversations that it's not COVID. It just happens to be COVID, the reason why I've got time to do it. But you don't have to mention it. You don't have to talk about Corona. You don't have to talk about when we're going back to work. You don't have to talk about how the business is going and things like that. Simply just talk about you, how your mate is, how your mum is, did you walk the dog? How's the dog doing? It is tough because things will kind of veer back in. But if you can really, really get, passionate about something that you enjoy, I think that's the best kind of conversation you can have. And maybe just put, do a swear jar, call it the COVID swear jar. Every time someone mentions something about COVID, put like a penny in a pot, tell yourself off for it. Because it will bring you down, and the last thing anybody really wants right now is to be brought down more than maybe people are, and it's a serious negative thing. But there's a lot of positives that come from this, and I couldn't express it enough. But us as people, the fact that we've got time to really look after ourselves, because there is only us, as a person at the end of the day, to look after yourself and your choices. This is probably the best time to start working on it and having those fun conversations. But yeah, swear jar, COVID swear jar, do that.
I think that's a great idea. I think that concludes it. I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much, Doug. Thank you for your time. And thank you everybody for joining us today. I see one more thing popping up. One more question. Okay. So what effect will COVID have on mental health in the industry? Will there be an increased number of sufferers? One more question.
Yeah, I think there already is an increase. I know just from obviously having Pilotlight as a thing that me and Andrew do, the outreach that we've had personally as well as through the Pilotlight page at the moment has been huge. A lot of people actually just asking for some advice and wanting to talk, but numbers are going to go up because it's the immediate impact of going from 100 miles an hour to zero is like running into a brick wall, and most of the time that's what mental health is and does. So I think we need to probably put it upon ourselves to start having a little look at just having a reach out to our staff and just seeing how everybody is, if you've got employees, but also as an employee, maybe just reach out to your boss. I mean, I text an old boss of mine this morning because I suddenly had the realization that the guy's got 4 restaurants and all 4 are closed, and I've no idea how he's probably feeling at the moment. He's probably pulling what little hair he has out as well. So I think it's important, more important than ever, that we increase our social connection, just so that the guys in the industry who are on their own, who are struggling, can do something to look after themselves. I know it's difficult to make time to reach out to everybody every day, but I think considering the numbers are going up, and we don't want, I think for me, Pilotlight to me is really about trying to seriously reduce the number of suicides in our industry, and the pressure on that, and considering as still, even during this lockdown period, the numbers for suicide, somebody dies every 40 seconds. We need to look at that from a mental health point of view and go, we can't have this in our industry. The industry was struggling before COVID. It's going to struggle after COVID, but we'll get through it. We just need to be a bit more supportive.
Yeah. So another question has come in. I manage a team of 10 and we have our weekly meeting to keep spirits up. What other ideas can you recommend to increase interaction to keep it fun and engaging?
So I'd been doing this little thing with a couple of people where I started calling it the after service beer, because pretty much at the end of every service we'd have a beer. I don't drink that much. I'm being very good with myself, which is amazing. But for me, it's a cup of tea. The guys might have a beer or whatever, but I just called it after service beer because we always had a catch up after work, and we always made sure that work wasn't a topic of conversation afterwards. So that's always a bit of a laugh. I would do games as well. I was trying to figure out how I could do like multi-Monopoly, which sounds a bit weird, but you know, doing something that's engaging and could be a bit of a laugh. I think quiz nights have been the best one that I've done so far. I'm terrible at quizzes, but they're actually quite fun to do when you've got like sort of 10, 15 people on there. And treat it as a bit of fun that way. And then that gets everybody involved, and more of a reason to actually join it as well. You know, a weekly team meeting, just spend 5 minutes catching up on what you've been doing for the week. And then, really get involved and try and make the banter going, like we have in hospitality. We have a good bit of banter. So have a laugh with each other, wind each other up, have a bit of fun. Obviously don't go too far, but I think that's the best way, and get people to start it themselves. If you're going to do a quiz, get one person to host it, get the next person to do it. So the following week, everybody's got something to do during the week, research, learning, designing questions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love the idea of people kind of switching around who manages the call. I will say one of the things I've seen at OpenTable has been there's a lot of fancy dress for some of these. So there's some of them are themed, which also keeps people engaged and kind of fun. All right, I've got another question here. The hospitality industry is one of the worst affected by the crisis. How do you think it will fundamentally change when it does come back? And are there any positives that can be taken from this time?
I think so. From my point of view of being a chef, my brain's actually been far more active about recipes and about things that I've wanted to do than there has been before. I think we've got time to address how we are as a business, how the business runs, what we offer, and whether it's deviating from the reason why you started the business in the first place. Sometimes it's you kind of go off course of the reason why you opened that restaurant to be that thing, that kind of. It is going to change. I'm not sure how and why, but I think going back to my previous comment about the community side of it, I think no matter what we're going through at the moment, if one person's unable to open their restaurant again, I think we've got 10 or 15 people that we know that we can jump on board with, help out and do things. I think it will be a slow burner, but I seriously think it's going to go forward and get working. It's difficult, but we're all in this together, and I think we can really help each other through it. So, yeah.
Cool. And then we have 2 minutes, and then I think our system also cuts us off. So the last question: what are the 2 things that you are most excited to do once we're kind of out of lockdown? What are you most looking forward to?
I'm really, really looking forward to seeing people. It sounds a bit weird. I've never been like it before, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to going and having a cup of tea around someone's house and a proper face-to-face catch up. I'm also looking forward to seeing how hospitality progresses through this, because I believe that we're strong enough to get through anything anyway as an industry. But I seriously think that we're going to go further, and I think that it's exciting. It's an exciting prospect to see what we're going to do and how we're going to progress after this issue, because it's negative, but seriously, we can draw a lot of positive from it all and really push ourselves forward.
Cool. Well, in that case, I see our ticker. We have 30 seconds left. So I think I will just say thank you very much, Doug, for your time and your wisdom and your thoughts.
You're welcome.
I guess if anybody is interested, they should go to your website and reach out to you via Instagram,
Yep.
or any other ways.
No, that's best. The best way to do it. If it goes through the Instagram, it goes directly to me anyway. So
Cool. And thank you everybody for your time. Thank you for joining us. And
thanks, guys.
we hope you have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. It's still there.
We're still there. Somebody needs to turn off some big button.